Black veteran woman harassed by cops. Her trained dogs react in seconds. They thought she'd be easy. Another quiet black woman in a suburban neighborhood, walking her dogs, blending into the morning haze like she didn't matter. Officers Doyle and Crane had seen her before. Every Tuesday, same hour, same sidewalk. They joked about her in the patrol car, called her Rambo Barbie and Dog Whisper. But this morning wasn't like the others. This morning, she looked them in the eye and didn't look away. What they didn't know was that Naomi Briggs wasn't just any woman. They were about to find out what it meant to corner someone trained to survive when others break. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful real-life inspired stories that challenge injustice and celebrate quiet strength. Now, let's go back to where it began. Naomi woke before dawn. She always did. It was a habit that never broke, even years after leaving the Navy. The silence of early morning was the only thing that ever felt close to peace. Echo and Nala, her two German shepherds, waited without a sound. No barking, no passing, just stillness, eyes on her, as if they knew every beat of her routine. She laced her boots, clipped on their leashes, and stepped out. No music in her ears, no distractions, just the rhythm of breath and boot on concrete. The same cracked sidewalk, the same narrow lawns with faded welcome signs and houses that stared back with closed curtains. This neighborhood was polite on the surface, but in the corners at the store, at the gas station, in line at the DMV, she saw it. The questions, the stiffness, like they were still trying to figure out why a black woman with military posture and high alert dogs had moved onto their block. A few neighbors nodded when they saw her. Some didn't. She didn't chase warmth anymore. After deployments overseas and years of carrying weight others didn't see, Naomi had grown used to that in-between space. Present but not welcome. But she had her mission now. Stay low, stay sharp, and walk every morning to keep herself and the dogs tuned. Nala, the younger one, was more reactive. Echo, older, larger, waited for her every breath. They were more than pets. They were partners, and they could tell the difference between curiosity and threat long before she could finish a sentence. Halfway through the second block, she saw the cruiser. White and gray. Markings clean, windows tinted. It slowed when it passed her. Naomi didn't flinch. She didn't stare. She kept her posture neutral. But she noted it, how the brake lights glowed longer than needed. Echo's ears twitched. Nala dropped her nose to the grass, but didn't move forward. Naomi didn't need to say anything. The shift in her grip on the leash was enough. 2 breaths later, the cruiser circled the block. She turned the corner, kept walking. Didn't change pace. She felt them watching, the way a soldier feels a laser sight before it's visible. She didn't know their names yet. Not until they parked just ahead and stepped out with that loose confidence some officers were when they think no one's watching. Doyle was tall, built like a former linebacker. Crane was leaner, quick eyes, resting smirk. She'd seen their kind before. Overseas, stateside, the kind that believe a badge is a shield for their ego. She stayed her pace, kept her breathing level. Echo matched her step. Nala's tail dipped slightly. Both dogs were reading the scene. Morning, Doyle said like he owned the sidewalk. Naomi nodded, her voice steady. Morning. Nice dogs, he added. They trained. Naomi didn't answer right away. She met his eyes, then said, They're under control. Just asking, Doyle shrugged. They look like military stock. You asked something. It wasn't friendly curiosity. It was a probe. Naomi didn't answer. That alone shifted the tone. Crane stepped closer, eyes flicking from Echo's leash to Naomi's hand. Mind if we ask a few questions? Am I being detained? She asked without raising her voice. Doyle's smile cracked. Just chatting, but his hand hovered near his belt. That was the tell. Nala released a soft, breathy growl, so low it barely registered to the ear, but Naomi caught it. A warning. She adjusted her stance subtly, just enough for both dogs to flank slightly behind her. She knew better than to escalate. She also knew these men didn't show up for small talk. Where you headed? Crane asked, pacing now, slow, deliberate. Same place I go every morning, Naomi said. Walk my dogs. Clean my head. Seems early for that, Doyle added. Not many people out. That your routine? Naomi didn't blink. It's my business. Echo growled once, short and sharp. The sound sliced through the air like a warning shot. Crane flinched. That dog aggressive? Naomi didn't answer. You should probably keep him in check, Doyle said. His hand was now visibly resting on his holster. They're fine, Naomi replied. You're making them tense. Us? Crane laughed, but there was no humor. Lady, we're just doing our job. You look a little too tactical to be walking dogs. That's not against the law, but it raises eyebrows. Naomi breathed in, steadied herself. My service record doesn't concern you. Service? Doyle leaned forward slightly. So you're ex-military. Naomi didn't confirm or deny, but she didn't look away either. That silence, that unbroken eye contact, it said everything. Crane didn't like it. He crouched slightly, like trying to make eye contact with Echo. Come here, boy, he said with a whistle. Naomi's jaw tensed. Don't do that. Her voice was calm, commanding. He smirked. What? I'm just trying to say hi. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of jerky. Held it out. Echo didn't move, just stared. Naomi didn't say a word. Nala growled this time. Louder. Doyle raised an eyebrow. Getting a little jumpy, aren't they? Naomi moved half a step forward. Not aggressive, not fearful, just placed herself between the dogs and the officers. Stop provoking them. Crane stood upright again, chewing on whatever amusement he could find. This how you always talk to police? Naomi didn't answer. Doyle stepped in now. Look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. But your dogs aren't going to scare us. Naomi's hand tightened on the leashes. Echo's body lowered just slightly. His eyes locked on Crane's boots. Nala's ears pinned back, their muscles coiled. Naomi's next words were measured. You need to take a step back. Doyle chuckled. You're not in the Navy anymore, Miss Briggs. The way he said her name wasn't a coincidence. They had looked her up, or they already knew. Naomi didn't flinch. She didn't move, but something changed in her eyes. The weight of years, of survival, of knowing exactly what someone will do 3 seconds before they do it. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. I said, step back. Crane's hand hovered over his sidearm. You threatening us now? No, Naomi said, eyes unmoving. I'm warning you. And that, right there, was the moment everything shifted. You could feel it, like air tightening before a storm. And even the dogs knew. Echo's growl deepened. Nala crouched, but they didn't move. Not until Naomi gave the command. Crane didn't back off. He held the jerky just inches from Echo's muzzle, trying to provoke a response. Smirking like this was a game. Echo didn't snap, but his stare had locked in, body tense, teeth slightly bared. Naomi's voice cut the moment sharp. Put that away. Now. But Crane ignored her. You sure this one's not trained to kill? Doyle laughed low, resting one hand casually on his belt, the other brushing his vest. Naomi saw the twitch in his fingers, the shift in his stance. Crane inched closer. Echo held steady, a statue carved in muscle and readiness. Naomi gave one short, sharp command, Echo, stay. Echo's body didn't move, but his growl deepened, low and constant like a simmer. Crane chuckled and dangled the meat closer. Come on, soldier. What's the worst that could happen? Then Naomi saw it, Crane's hand inching toward his sidearm, not slow anymore. Instinct snapped through her spine like a whip. She pulled the leash tight, stepped between him and Echo, and spoke again, clearer this time. I'm telling you, stand down. Crane stopped smiling. Lady, control your damn dog. He raised his voice, drawing attention that wasn't there. This is aggression. I can put him down right now. Naomi didn't blink. You pull that trigger, and you'll answer for it. Doyle stepped off the curb now. We don't have time for this. Let's move her along. On what grounds? Naomi's voice didn't waver, but her fingers flexed slightly on the leash. I haven't done a thing. Crane moved first. A sudden jerk, one hand to the holster, the other dropping the jerky. Naomi barely had time to register the motion before Doyle reached for his taser. And then came the sound, sharp, unmistakable, a crack like bone breaking the air. A warning shot. Naomi flinched. Echo recoiled back with a clipped yelp, his paw scraping the pavement. She felt it vibrate through the leash, through her hand, like a live wire. Nala barked once, fierce and guttural, but didn't lunge. The round hadn't hit, just missed. But it was close. Too close. Naomi turned, dropped to a crouch beside Echo, checked the leg. No blood, no bone, but the tremor in his flank told her enough. It wasn't fear. It was restraint. Echo had been trained to hold until told otherwise. But this wasn't a training field. This was a street where restraint didn't matter if someone else pulled the trigger first. That was a warning, Crane said, stepping forward again, his weapon still half raised. You want to see what comes next? Naomi straightened slowly, her voice flat. You fired at my dog. At me. Doyle's hand tightened on his taser, but he didn't move yet. We gave you a chance to walk away. That's what I was doing, Naomi said. Her voice was even, sharp enough to cut. You followed. You provoked. You fired. Crane's smirk came back, uglier now. You gonna lecture me, lady? He stepped in again. You think because you've got a uniform in your past and some leash in your hand, you get to act like you run the street? Naomi didn't move. Not until his hand touched her shoulder. An intentional violation, just enough contact to set off the alarm inside her. She reacted on instinct. A twist of the wrist, a shift of her weight, and Crane was off balance before he knew it. Naomi caught his forearm, spun under, and used his forward motion against him. His elbow cracked against her shoulder as she ducked low, driving her momentum upward. His gun clattered to the pavement. She grabbed his wrist and torqued it, dropping him with a gasp and a thud. Doyle moved instantly, but Echo was faster. The dog launched forward, not to bite, not yet, but to plant himself between Naomi and the second officer. His stance was protective, not aggressive, but his teeth showed, and his growl was louder now, deeper. Nala flanked Naomi's other side, posture low, eyes on Doyle's fingers inching for his taser again. Naomi didn't waste a second. She dropped beside Crane's collapsed body and yanked the chest cam from his vest with a practiced hand. The latch came loose under her fingers. She held the device up, turned it off, slid it in her back pocket. Crane groaned, rolling onto his side. You're finished, he hissed through clenched teeth. Naomi stood over him. You started this. Doyle raised the taser now. Let them go, or I swear, Naomi faced him. You shoot, and both dogs will respond. You'll be on the ground before you can call it in. You threatening an officer? I'm telling you what happens next. Doyle's eyes flicked to Echo, to Nala, then back to Naomi. The taser dropped an inch, but he didn't back away. His jaw clenched. You just assaulted law enforcement. No, Naomi said. I defended myself. She moved slowly, hands where he could see them, but her presence was steel, the kind that doesn't shake. Your body cam will show it. Doyle's mouth twitched. Will it? Funny. Looks like it's been ripped off. Naomi turned her head slightly. Too bad yours is still rolling. That was the break. Doyle froze. Naomi took a small step back, calculated. Her dogs held formation. No chows. Just control. We're leaving, she said. Try and stop me. She stepped back. No sudden moves. No fast strides. Just space widening. She turned. Echo and Nala flanked her automatically. Doyle didn't fire. Didn't chase. Just stood in place, breathing hard, watching the woman he thought was easy disappear with the evidence in her pocket, and two trained protectors by her side. Naomi moved fast, staying low as she cut through the trees behind the housing development. Echo limped but stayed close, his steps, even despite the weight, shifted off his front paw. Nala flanked him protectively, scanning each side like a second pair of eyes. Naomi didn't speak, didn't slow down, just kept her breath measured and her ears open. She knew the sounds of pursuit, and so far, there were none. That wouldn't last. She didn't need to be told what the next few hours would look like. 2 injured officers. 1 missing body cam. A black woman with military training walking away from the scene. The narrative would write itself, unless she controlled it first. They moved deeper into the woods, following an old trail Naomi remembered from her training runs years back. It led to a place no one used anymore, an abandoned ranger post just big enough to hide in. The frame was rotting and the paint long gone, but the structure held. When she finally stepped inside, closing the weather-warped door behind her, her knees buckled for a moment. Echo dropped to the floor with a soft exhale. Nala stayed standing, still on alert, still waiting for the next move. Naomi moved quickly, laying her pack down, pulling the medical kit from the bottom. She sat beside Echo and inspected the damage. The round hadn't hit him, but the grazing heat of it had left a raised burn along his shoulder. No blood, no break, but it hurt. She cleaned the area, applied ointment, wrapped it with the last strip of gauze she had. Echo didn't whimper. He just stared at her, still and trusting. Naomi sat back against the wall, breathing shallow. Her pulse was still too high, her hands still slightly shaking, but her thoughts were starting to align again. She reached into the side pouch of her bag and pulled out a prepaid burner phone. No GPS, no account, no trace. She turned it on and scrolled through the old contacts until she found the one labeled just R. She pressed it. It rang twice. Hello. The voice was tired but sharp. Ria, it's me. A pause, then a sharp inhale. Naomi? Jesus, where have you? Your name's everywhere right now. I don't have time. I need your help. They're saying you attacked 2 officers, Naomi. One's hospitalized. That's not what happened. I need you to find camera footage from the surrounding houses. Anything that shows the lead up, before the shot, before I touched anyone. You have any idea what you're asking? They're sealing this up fast. You're the only one who can get past their firewall before they wipe it. You still know your way into local nodes. Of course, but this is serious. So is framing me as a violent ex-SEAL. Just do what you can. I'll check back in an hour. Naomi hung up. She powered up the small weather radio she kept stashed with the emergency gear and scanned through static until a local law enforcement frequency clicked in. Voices moved fast. Codes. Status reports. Then one sentence chilled her. Suspect is considered armed and dangerous. Extreme caution advised. Officer down. Footage unavailable. Approach with full tactical response if spotted. Naomi's jaw clenched. The body cam footage was unavailable. They were already rewriting the story, painting her as a threat. There'd be no record of who escalated first. No proof the shot was theirs. No record of how she reacted only after they reached for their weapons. She closed her eyes and leaned back, the reality crashing into her harder than the adrenaline had earlier. The uniform she used to wear didn't matter now. The rules, the training, the chain of command, it meant nothing. Now she was the threat, the headline. She looked down at Echo, then at Nala. They stared back, calm but watchful. They'd stood with her through worse, but this was different. This was home, and they weren't the invaders. Yet somehow, they were the ones being hunted. She pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them, and tried to think. She needed time, but she wouldn't get much. Once the manhunt widened, this place wouldn't stay safe. Not with drones, not with dogs, not with tech. She needed proof. She needed truth. And she needed to move before they boxed her in. She clicked the burner back on and opened an encrypted messaging app. She typed fast, sending Ria a list of street addresses and possible camera angle from the homes nearby. If she could get even one security cam from a garage, a porch, or a dash cam, something that showed her walking, the first interaction, the moment the shot rang out, that could change everything. It wouldn't erase what happened, but it might be enough to shift public perception, or at least to cast doubt. The problem wasn't whether she was telling the truth. The problem was who controlled the footage. She checked Echo's dressing again. Clean. No signs of infection. Nala finally relaxed enough to lie beside him. Naomi didn't sleep. She didn't dare. The night outside was too still, the kind of still that comes before pursuit. She kept her eyes open and one hand on her bag. It was going to get worse before it got better, and she was already running out of time. The video came in just before sunrise. Grainy, from a front porch cam angled toward the sidewalk, but it was enough. Ria had accessed 3 neighboring home networks and pulled raw surveillance files. Most were irrelevant, trash bins, squirrels, delivery trucks, but one had the angle Naomi needed. It showed her walking calmly, dogs leashed, hands visible. Then the cruiser rolled into frame. The timestamp matched exactly. She didn't approach them. They approached her. No confrontación. No agresión. Not until the taller officer stepped too close, hand brushing his weapon. And then a flash. The sound didn't carry on the footage, but the motion told the story. Naomi flinched. The dogs pulled back. Everything after that, everything they were accusing her of, came after that moment. Rhea clipped the file, ran a stabilizer pass, added timestamp overlays, and sent it off through a secure line. The recipient wasn't a lawyer or a reporter. It was Detective Lin Tang, a name Naomi hadn't said aloud in years. Lin had worked internal affairs in another city once. She'd investigated a series of cover-ups, so clean they nearly ruined her career. She didn't trust easily. She didn't act on rumor. But she had one quality Naomi needed more than anything. She watched quietly when others looked away. Lin opened the file at her desk in the precinct, half hidden behind a stack of paperwork and a badge number that had been quietly demoted 2 years back. She didn't speak when she saw the footage. She didn't message back. She didn't need to. She got up and walked straight to the evidence locker. The body cam logs for Officers Doyle and Crane were marked technical failure. She scanned the logs. Files empty, but she knew where to look. She plugged into the secondary drive archive and pulled the metadata. The cameras had recorded. The timestamps were there. Power cycles, data file creation. Everything confirmed the devices were active during the incident. The footage didn't fail. It was deleted. Lynn sat with that knowledge for a long time. She'd seen it before. Bad shooting, messy follow-up, and then a glitch. But this wasn't a new rookie making a dumb mistake. This was a calculated takedown, framing someone with a spotless military record. On purpose. She checked Naomi's name in the system. Flag red. Wanted. Public threat. Suspected of assault, resisting arrest, animal aggression, destruction of police property. All of it stacked with no counter-narrative. And now, she had a counter. Lynn encrypted the surveillance file and loaded it onto an offline drive. She didn't upload it. Not yet. Not until she knew who was moving this from the inside. Meanwhile, Naomi was already planning her next move. The pain had settled into routine now. Less adrenaline, more cold calculation. She knew the system wouldn't correct itself. Not without pressure. And pressure required names, dates, and proof of motive. Doyle and Crane weren't just dirty. They were protected. That meant someone else had more to lose than just 2 crooked cops. She started digging. Rhea helped from her end, cross-checking public records and internal rosters. They found an overlap. Crane had been disciplined quietly 3 years ago for excessive force. The file had vanished after his transfer to this district. Doyle had been moved twice across precincts for conflict of leadership with superior officers. Neither record had any internal complaints listed after the fact. It was clean. Too clean. Someone had scrubbed them both. Naomi had one name in mind. Lieutenant Braxley, retired but still connected. He'd been Doyle's field instructor. She remembered the stories, how Braxley ran his unit like a private militia, how complaints vanished when they crossed his desk. If Doyle and Crane were still working in his shadow, he might be the one protecting them now. She needed to confirm it. She packed light, left the cabin before noon. Echo's limp had eased. Nala tracked their path like clockwork. Naomi looped through back trails, avoided roads, moved with precision. She had one goal now. Get to Braxley's old house, find a thread to pull. Rhea texted once. Lynn saw the footage. She's in. That was all Naomi needed. She didn't trust the system, but she trusted the people who'd walked away from it the right way. Lynn was one of them. Now they just had to hold the story long enough for it to surface. Because if they didn't, Naomi knew what would come next. She'd be caught, smeared, and buried before the truth ever hit daylight. And this time, she wasn't walking away without a fight. The phone went dark at 4:17 a.m. Rhea's last message came through a minute earlier. 3 grainy screenshots of a folder dump she'd pulled from an internal server, each file tagged with encrypted ID strings that didn't match any police database. Naomi saw them once, then again. One file name caught her eye. Doyle, XSIG 143. A dead giveaway. It was federal, not local. She tried to call. No signal. The line was dead before she could ask what it meant. She switched to the tracking software they'd embedded into Rhea's burner. Last ping from an industrial sector outside town. Tag inactive. Utility Lot B. A warehouse zone no longer listed in any public city contract. Naomi stared at the coordinates and didn't hesitate. She packed light. Echo and Nala flanked her at the door without a word. She didn't drive in. Too exposed. She parked 2 miles out and took a utility trail on foot, cutting through a series of overgrown lots and rusted fence lines. The sky hadn't even turned gray yet. The warehouse complex stood cold and wide, a flat sprawl of steel and dust. One building still had lights deep inside. Motion sensors hadn't been stripped. Naomi scoped from elevation, found a pattern. 2 men on rotation outside, one near a service entrance, the other watching the back access. Both armed, one lazy, the other tense. She clocked their loops, watched Echo's ears twitch as if counting each footstep. Nala stayed tighter to her right side, the more reactive of the two,